The rain hadn't let up for hours, drumming against the sagging roof of a modest clapboard house on the outskirts of a sleepy South Carolina town. Inside, Ellen Harper, a 55-year-old widow with grey-streaked hair and tired eyes, poured herself a mug of black coffee. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of another solitary morning. At 55, she'd grown accustomed to the quiet. Her daughter had moved to Charleston years ago, and her husband Tom, a former police officer, had been gone for nearly a decade, taken by a heart attack. The house felt too big for one person, its creaks and groans louder than her own thoughts. But this morning, something felt different. As Ellen stepped onto her porch, cradling her steaming mug, a flicker of movement caught her eye near the rusted gate at the end of her gravel drive. There, standing in the downpour, was a dog, not just any dog, a German shepherd, tall and lean, his dark coat plastered to his frame, his eyes sharp and amber, locked onto hers through the curtain of rain. Ellen's breath hitched. She knew that Stance Tom had worked with K9 units for years, and this dog carried the same proud, unyielding presence, yet beneath that dignity she saw hunger. His ribs pressed faintly against his sides and his paws were caked with mud. He didn't bark or flinch, just stood there watching her, with a quiet intensity that made her heart twist. Ellen set her mug on the porch railing and stepped into the rain, ignoring the chill seeping through her sweater. She didn't speak, didn't call out. Instead, she went inside, rummaged through her fridge, and returned with a bowl of leftover pot roast and mashed potatoes. She placed it just inside the gate, then backed away, watching from beneath the overhang. "You look like you've carried the world on your back," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. The dog didn't move at first. Then with measured steps he approached the bowl and began to eat each bite, deliberate as if he were conserving strength. Ellen's chest tightened. There was something about him, something heavy, like he bore an invisible burden when he finished. He lifted his head, meeting her gaze again for a moment. The world seemed to pause, the rain fading to a hum. Then, as silently as he'd appeared, he turned and vanished into the pines across the road. Ellen stood there, soaked and shivering, her mind racing. Who was he? Where had he come from that night she barely slept? Her thoughts tangled with the memory of those piercing eyes. She told herself he was just a stray, a ghost passing through. But deep down she hoped he'd return the next morning. As dawn broke through a thinning veil of clouds, Ellen opened her front door and froze there. He was sitting on her porch steps, his coat still damp, but his posture straight, almost regal. Her heart leapt, a mix of relief and curiosity flooding her chest. But he wasn't alone. At his side lay a bundle, and as Ellen stepped closer, her pulse quickened. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched her with that same unyielding calm when she knelt beside him, her knees sinking into the wet wood. She saw it, a weathered police badge, scratched and tarnished, nestled in a torn scrap of uniform cloth. Beside it, wrapped in the fabric, was a tiny, whimpering puppy no bigger than a loaf of bread, its fur matted and its eyes barely open. Ellen's breath caught her hands, trembling as she reached for the badge. Tears stung her eyes before she could name the feeling. Grief, wonder, something deeper. The badge was like the one Tom used to wear. Its weight, familiar in her palm, the puppy stirred, letting out a soft cry, and Ellen's heart broke open. She looked at the shepherd, her voice cracking. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, of course, but his steady gaze felt like a promise, a message he'd carried across miles and years. Ellen scooped the puppy into her arms, cradling its fragile warmth, and carried it inside the shepherd, followed his steps, slow and deliberate, as if he'd been waiting for permission. She wrapped the puppy in a towel, whispering, "You're safe now, little one." The words spilling out like a reflex, the same ones she'd used with her daughter when she was small. The shepherd sat by the fireplace, his eyes scanning the room, once before settling as if he'd claimed the space. Long ago, Ellen placed the badge on her kitchen table, her fingers lingering on the cloth. It was real, too real. The name etched on the back stopped her cold. J. Carter. Her breath hitched. James Carter had been Tom's last partner, a young officer paired with a canine named Valor. Ellen remembered Valor's dark coat, his unwavering focus. Carter had vanished 5 years ago during a search mission in the Low Country woods. The department called it an accident, said he drowned in the river. No body, no dog, no answers. Ellen's hands shook as she looked at the shepherd. "Is that you, Valor?" she whispered. The dog didn't move, but when she approached, he lifted a paw and rested it gently on her arm. Tied to his leg was another scrap of cloth. Her heart pounded as she untied it. Revealing a small plastic case inside was a flash drive. That night, Ellen sat at her old desktop. The puppy, whom she'd started calling Ember, curled in a blanket by the hearth. Valor lay beside him, his eyes never leaving the room. Ellen inserted the drive, her stomach nodding as a folder appeared for Ellen. She clicked it, and James Carter's face filled the screen, scruffy and tired, his voice heavy. "If you're watching this, Valor found you. I knew he would. Something's wrong with this mission. Ellen, they sent us out here alone. No backup, no explanation if I don't make it. Valor knows where to go. He remembers everything." Ellen's chest ached, tears blurring the screen. Carter spoke of a cover-up of evidence he'd hidden of a man named Colonel Robert Vance, who'd used K-9 units to move untraceable assets. He trusted Valor to deliver the truth. The final words hit her hardest. "You were always kind, Ellen. You'll know what to do." The video ended and Ellen sat back numb. 5 years. 5 years since Carter's disappearance, and Valor had carried this burden alone. Until now, the next morning, Ellen stood on her porch, a mug of tea, warming her hands. The rain had stopped. Sunlight filtering through the pines, but the weight of Carter's words pressed against her. Valor sat beside Ember, his ears twitching at every sound. Ellen knelt, brushing a hand along his fur. "Why now, boy?" she asked, her voice soft. His eyes met hers, steady and sure, and she knew the story wasn't over. Ellen opened another file from the drive. A journal entry dated weeks before Carter's disappearance. "Found another mark on a tree today. Same as last month," reported it, but they dismissed it. "Valor's on edge. Something's watching us." Another entry mentioned a discarded uniform buried by a creek, stained with blood. Ellen's stomach churned. None of this had been in the official report. She printed the entries highlighting names, dates, GPS coordinates. If Carter had been silenced, she owed it to him and to Valor to uncover the truth. That afternoon, Ellen called Detective Laura Gaines, a friend of Tom's she hadn't spoken to in years. Laura was tough, honest, the kind of cop who didn't back down when Ellen explained everything: the dog, the badge, the drive. Laura's voice was grim. "Don't tell anyone else, Ellen. I'm coming tomorrow." That night, Valor lay at the foot of her bed, Ember curled against him. Ellen stared at the ceiling, there's her heart racing. Whatever Valor had brought to her doorstep, it wasn't just a gift, it was a warning. Laura arrived at noon, her boots crunching on the gravel. She hadn't changed much. Short, cropped hair, sharp eyes, a no-nonsense air. Valor watched from the window, silent and still. "That's a K-9 if I've ever seen one," Laura said, stepping onto the porch. "He's more than that," Ellen replied, handing over the badge. The cloth, the drive. They spent hours combing through the files, Laura's jaw tightening as she read. Carter's words, "This wasn't in the report," she muttered. "They said it was a landslide, that he fell into the river." Ellen's voice was quiet. "They lied." Laura stood her coffee untouched. "The coordinates in the journal. They point to his spot deep in the forest. You up for a drive?" Ellen hesitated. She wasn't a cop, wasn't sure she was brave, but Valor's presence had stirred something in her, a resolve she hadn't felt in years. "I'm coming," she said. They left Ember with food and water, his tiny whimper tugging at Ellen's heart. As she closed the door, Valor leapt into Laura's SUV, his movements sure as if he'd been waiting for this. They drove for an hour, the road narrowing into a dirt path swallowed by dense woodland. Laura parked near a rusted fence, the forest looming beyond. "GPS says it's a mile in." She said Valor was already ahead, his ears high, tail straight. The forest was silent, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. 30 minutes in, Valor stopped, his nose hovering over the ground. Then he veered left off the trail into the trees. "Should we trust him?" Laura asked. Ellen didn't answer. She just followed. They reached a clearing overgrown, and forgotten at its center was a mound of disturbed earth rock stacked. Haphazardly, like a grave, Laura froze. "Oh my God!" Ellen stepped forward, her heart in her throat. Half buried among the stones was a scrap of uniform, and beside it a second badge. Laura brushed away the dirt, revealing the name T. Maroro. "Thomas Maroro," Laura whispered. "Missing 3 years ago, different precinct. No connection to Carter on record." Ellen's voice was steady. Until now, Valor circled the grave, then sat his gaze fixed forward like a soldier at attention. This was deliberate. Laura said someone didn't want them found. A branch snapped in the distance, loud and sharp. Laura drew her weapon, her voice low. "Stay behind me." Valor growled a deep, fierce sound. The trees rustled, then fell silent. They weren't alone. Ellen's pulse raced, her hands clenching the badge. Whoever had buried those officers was still out there. The drive back was tense, Laura's hand near her holster. Valor's eyes scanning the road back at the house. Ellen rushed to Ember, who barked with relief, his tiny tail wagging. The house felt exposed, as if the forest's shadow had followed them. Laura paced, her phone pressed to her ear, trying to reach a contact in internal affairs. "That second badge wasn't an accident," she said, hanging up in frustration. "2 officers, different departments, both gone. That's a pattern." Ellen knelt beside Valor, her voice soft. "You knew they were out there, didn't you?" His body trembled slightly, not in fear, but in focus. Then just after nightfall, a knock came. 3 sharp raps on the door. Laura froze. Valor stood teeth bared. The knock came again, harder. Laura peeked through the curtain, her eyes narrowing. A man alone, standing on the porch like he owns it. Valor's growl deepened. Laura opened the door, a crack at her badge, visible gun at her side. "Can I help you?" The man was tall, late 50s, his voice smooth. "I'm looking for a dog German. Shepherd answers to Valor government property, disappeared during a classified operation." Laura's voice was ice-funny, because reports say Valor was deceased along with his handler. The man's smile thinned. Those reports were filed under orders. Ellen stepped forward, ignoring Laura's warning glance. He brought back badges, 2 of them, and a drive full of evidence. Why now the man's eyes flickered. "Annoyance, maybe fear. Stay out of this, ma'am, for your own good." Valor stepped between them, his teeth glinting, a primal sound rumbling in his chest. The man backed away, disappearing into the darkness. Ellen locked the door, her hands shaking. She sat beside Valor and Ember, the puppy curling into her lap. "They're coming back," Laura said quietly. Ellen nodded, stroking Valor's fur. "But we won't run." Just before dawn, Valor let out a soft whine, not fear, but longing. He stood staring at the door. Ellen touched his fur. "Do you want to show me?" He walked to the door, and Ellen knew he wasn't running. He was finishing something. Laura grabbed her jacket. "Let's go." They left Ember in blankets and followed Valor into the woods. He led them to a moss-covered stump, pawing at the ground. Laura brushed away leaves, revealing a sealed plastic bag. Inside were photos, documents, and a letter addressed to Laura. The photos showed men in uniform exchanging money, dated in Carter's handwriting. The documents named Colonel Robert Vance. The letter read, "Laura, if Valor finds you, I didn't make it. Vance is running covert deals using Chinese as couriers. Don't let this die with me." A shout echoed from the woods, boots crashing through brush. "They found us," Laura said, drawing her weapon. They ran, Valor leading them to an old ranger station. Shots rang out, one grazing a tree near Ellen's head. Inside, Laura flipped a desk for cover. "If we hold them off my car's system, we'll ping dispatch," she said. Valor stood by the door, unflinching. A voice called out, "Give us the shepherd, and we walk away." Ellen touched Valor's back. "You've done enough." But she knew this was his mission. Chaos erupted. Valor leapt through the door, tackling one attacker. A gunshot rang out. Laura and Ellen ran out, finding the man unconscious, Valor standing over him, his paw bleeding. The second attacker had fled. Ellen pressed her jacket to Vala's wound, tears streaming down her face. "You're not done, boy." They carried him to the SUV, speeding to town as sirens wailed in the distance. At the vet, an ex-military medic worked on Vala, promising to do everything he could. Hours later, the vet emerged. "He's going to be okay." Ellen's knees buckled, Laura catching her. The evidence was verified. Vance arrested days later. Vala came home, his leg, bandaged his eyes, still bright. Ember nuzzled him, and for the first time Vala rested Ellen, framed Carter's badge. The photos and a picture of Vala and Ember on the porch. The sun rising behind them, the town called Vala a hero, but to Ellen he was family. Every morning, Vala sat by the door, not as a soldier, but as a guardian. If this story moved you, subscribe to Unleashed Emotions, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in loyalty and second chances. Your support brings more stories like this to